Hello, I'm Osukarui and I mostly speedrun obscure N64 games. These games generally don't have a lot of speedrunning documentation, so in this series I want to document my personal experience when speedrunning these games. I'll therefore cover the history of the game as a speed game, talk about speed strats, interesting movement tech, and glitches, along with the world record progression for the game. I hope you enjoy. Okay, I'm going to start this video with a spoiler of sorts. Spider-Man has had 8 world record holders in the any % category for the N64 version of the game, and none of them has ever reclaimed the world record after losing it. This means that each one of these 8 players had a single reign or era where they were the designated champion of the game before losing that status indefinitely when someone bested them and claimed the throne. So let's take a step back and get to know these 8 champions and learn exactly how each of them earned a place among the greatest of the game. One disclaimer before we start. Unless stated otherwise, I will be referring to the N64 version of the game. This game has multiple leaderboards for different versions, and I want to make it very clear that this video is only about the N64 version. If you are interested in other versions, Soteleer recently made a video on the world record progression history for the PlayStation version of the game, which I have in the description of this video and would really recommend. But without further ado, our first champion. Our first champion is Josh Cass, and he would set 1 or maybe 2 world records for the game. His only uploaded run clocks in at 39 minutes and 49 seconds, set on the 31st of March 2013. There are no splits in the video file, so it's hard to say if they had any previous PBs, so as far as we know, this is the first world record for the game. And not only is this the first run for the N64 version, but Josh Cass was the first person to run the game at all, counting all versions. Although he never uploaded another run to the internet, around 4 months later, Josh Cass did mention in an old Speed Demos archive forum that he achieved a run clocking in at 38 minutes and 27 seconds. And although the claim was made in a forum about the PlayStation version, Josh Cass did confirm with me that the run was on N64. Sadly, no video exists for this run, so there is no way to verify this claim. But given how early in the timeline this is, and considering things are not very optimized yet, I think it's fair to say it's very likely this run did happen. So, for the purposes of this video, we'll say Josh Cass got a 38:27. Now, Josh Cass's run was a pretty decent one for a first world record. For many games, the first speedrunning world record is just a casual playthrough of sorts, but Josh clearly knew the game fairly well and had definitely practiced and prepared a bit for the run. So, with Josh as the person to set the standard for speedrunning the game, he really did set the bar pretty high. It was understandably not at all optimized yet, but I would say it was a very strong start for the game. Now, before we can really talk about any innovations to the gameplay, we need to know a bit about the game itself. For a game this short, it actually has quite a lot of levels, 34 to be exact. Since there is no hub world or level select, every level has to be played, and although some items like health and web shooters can be collected and used in other levels, there is very little focus on that, and the aim of the game here is just to finish each level as fast as possible. This means that each level is a fairly contained puzzle, platforming or fighting sequence, and if you do the math based on Josh's run being 39 minutes and the game having 34 levels, you can see that each level came out to just over a minute on average. So again, the levels are short and can be finished quickly. The main movement in the game is, unsurprisingly, the web slinging. There are 2 types of movement-based web shots. The first is the general web swing, which makes Spider-Man shoot upwards and forwards and allows the player to do big sweeping arcs while swinging. Depending on when you initiate the swing and how far away the target is, the web swing can have different speeds and lose different amounts of height. So there's also a lot of nuance in how to apply these swings to maximize speed. There's also a technique you can use with these called swing cancelling. If you swing towards one building, you can cancel your swing in the middle to realign Spider-Man before starting a new swing while in the air. This allows you to navigate tighter corners and allows you to continue moving without having to stop on walls and such. However, by swing cancelling you also lose height, which in turn might mean you have to slowly crawl up buildings to get on top again. So there is a balancing act in how you swing and how much height you have while trying to go fast. The second web shooting method is called a zipline and allows Spider-Man to shoot a web to a nearby wall or ceiling and zip very fast towards the spot you shot at. The ziplines, or zips, have a more limited range distance-wise, so although they are technically faster, the more general web swing is used much more throughout the run. To go as fast as possible, a mix of these has to be used. Now, there is maybe a third option to talk about, which is to go into first-person mode to aim at a specific point to web swing towards. This is rarely used for general movement, since going into first-person view requires you to stop moving and is therefore generally slow, but instead it's used more for glitches, which we will see later in the video. Now back to Jaws' run. Jaws only really introduced one small skip into the run. In the level Scale the Girders, you normally end the level by swinging on top of this crate, which is then followed by a cutscene where Spider-Man lands on the crate and a helicopter shoots at him, making both him and the crate fall down to the bottom, where the actual end level trigger is located. JawsCast, however, realized you could swing towards the crate to trigger the end of the level, but before Spider-Man actually landed on the crate, Jaws stopped swinging and fell straight down into the end level trigger. This way, Spider-Man reached the bottom of the level much quicker and it essentially skipped the cutscene where the helicopter shoots down the crate, saving a few seconds. Now, there isn't all that much more to say about our first champion. Judging by JawsCast's comments on his YouTube video, he didn't really like the game all that much, so understandably he wasn't all that interested in taking the game any further. JawsCast might not have done a lot of work on the game, but what he did do is he provided a solid start for this speed game's journey and a base for our next champion to work on. Our second champion is the Packle, who around 8 months after JawsCast's last run would set 3 world records, overcoming 4-minute barriers along the way. His first world record was set on the 9th of March 2014 and clocked in at 37 minutes and 5 seconds. And then only 4 days later, on the 12th of March, he set 2 more world records, first a 36:13 and then a 34:37, skipping the 35-minute barrier completely. Now, the Packle had a few tricks up his sleeve, so let's take a look at what he implemented into the run. Packle's first big skip came in the level Sewage Plant. First, let's look at how the level is played normally. You first run to the end of this hallway and go up into these corridors. Up there, you need to press a sequence of buttons to both lower the water levels and get through and open gates, blocking the path to the next area. After going through both wings of the level, you open up a gate located here in the original corridor, and once you go through the gate, you press one switch and finish the level. Now, time to introduce an important speedrunning mechanic in the game. By going into first-person aiming mode to aim where your web shot goes, if you position the cursor just right, you can actually aim through the small gaps between some walls. When you then shoot, Spider-Man is zipped very fast towards the spot you aim, and this allows Spider-Man to go through to the other side of the wall, which you would normally never be able to pass through. Using this, you can essentially clip through some walls by abusing these tiny gaps. And just to note, it's not always necessary to go into first-person view to achieve these clips, so sometimes you can just clip through a wall by running into a corner and zipping repeatedly at the corner until you go through. Now, back to the sewage plant level. The player Bonesaw557 found out that the gate leading to the end of the level had a small gap which you could shoot through. After shooting, Spider-Man would be zipped right to the spot where you're aiming at, on the other side of the gate. Amazingly, Bonesaw had actually accidentally discovered this during one of his runs on the PlayStation version. What? Using this, the Packle was able to run straight to this gate, clip through to the end, hit the switch and end the level, skipping all of these big detours in the wings on both sides of the level. Then, in the very next level, Hidden Switches, he performed another one of these clips, this time discovered by Ababob, and later improved on by Bonesaw and Firecrotch. In this level, you normally have to press these 4 switches in the corners of the level in the right order, which will then lower the water here in the middle, allowing you to continue to the bottom into this corridor. Ababob discovered that by going up into the corner of the ceiling here and again shooting at the right angle, Spider-Man can clip through the wall and go out of bounds to jump into the corridor with the level ending trigger. The route then looked like this, running straight into the corner, clipping through and jumping to the last corridor. The last big trick that the Packle implemented was again discovered by Ababob and was in the level Waterfront Warehouse. Normally you have to destroy these 4 generators in these 2 main areas before gaining access to this tunnel system, leading all the way to the bottom of the level, where you end the level by jumping into this shaft here. Ababob discovered you could instead jump on top of these crates at the start, but then fall right down again. However, when you fall down, you land next to a barrel, which pushes you partly through a wall. And by shooting a web at the right angle, Spider-Man can clip fully through the wall. Now, before we move on, we need to talk about loading triggers in the game. A lot of the tricks moving forward have to do with skipping loading triggers in order to make the game skip loading in certain walls or geometry, allowing you to skip past it. So, for example, let's make an imaginary situation for demonstrative purposes. Say Spider-Man needs to get from section A to B, where he needs to fight a bunch of enemies, to unlock the gate leading to C to end the level. Normally, when Spider-Man goes from section A here to section B, he has to go through this corridor to get to section B, so the loading trigger for the next area is located here in the middle of the corridor. But if Spider-Man can somehow get out of bounds and manages to circumvent the loading trigger, section B never loads in properly, so Spider-Man can jump directly from section A to C, skipping the fight in section B. Now, to see this in action, let's return to the Waterfront Warehouse. The last thing we did was to use this barrel to clip through this wall to get out of bounds. This means we have the option to skip the loading trigger, which loads the next part of the level. Which in turn means the level will now look something like this, where only some parts are loaded in. This small corridor is still loaded in, so you can web swing your way into that corridor, but because the next section of the level isn't loaded in, the corridor ends with nothing and you can just jump into the out of bounds area. When you jump, however, this tunnel conveniently appears, so you can jump down here into the last tunnel system in the level, which is also just partially loaded in. And from there you can make one last jump into the out of bounds, which, if done right, can touch the level ending trigger in the void at the bottom here. Now, this skip was somewhat convoluted and difficult, but it skipped both having to destroy any of the generators and navigating the level normally. After this level, the Packle just finished the run normally, and the rest was history. Now, did the Packle truly optimize the game? No. As we will see, most definitely not, but he did push the game further than anyone before, bringing together knowledge from other players and glitch hunters to demonstrate a run representing a community rather than just an individual, like Joshcast had shown. And although at that point this community was still pretty spread out and just loosely connected through a few speed demos archive posts, this was still a sign of where things were heading. However, we would have to wait a bit before the community would really start forming, because, well, the Packle would actually end up being the longest standing champion the game has seen to this day. The Packle's run would stand at the top of the leaderboard for almost 5 years, before we would see our next champion. On the 10th of December 2018, Acer9393 set a new world record, clocking in at 34 minutes and 26 seconds. Did they introduce something new? Well, yes, they did. Let's take a look. In the level Hostage Situation, Acer did attempt a new trick, not seen before in a world record, but since it was super finicky, they failed. So I won't talk about it at this point in the video, as it has not been used in a world record at this point. However, in the very next level, Stop the Bomb, they did pull off a trick not used before. Normally you have to beat up a few guards in these first 2 sections of the level in order for this door to open, allowing you to access the last part of the level. The player Piston had discovered that using a wall clip, Spider-Man could web himself to the other side of the gate, skipping having to beat up any guards. So Acer could just run straight to the last part of the level much faster than intended. Then, in the level Elevator Descent, Acer implemented another skip. In this level you normally have to ride down an elevator, which moves very slowly, and along the way you have to fight a bunch of enemies, along with pressing this button to make the elevator move again after stopping. The elevator in turn breaks these barriers, which ultimately allows you to progress to the opening at the bottom, allowing you to finish the level. The player Arttaz discovered that you could zip your way out of bounds with a wall clip, and then just fall while out of bounds all the way to the bottom of the elevator shaft and go straight to the opening. Falling is of course much faster than the normal elevator descent, so this can save quite a bit of time. And then lastly, in the previously mentioned Waterfront Warehouse, Acer implemented a new and improved method to skip most of the level. The Packle had needed to maneuver through a bunch of half-loaded corridors to make his way through the level, but Acer skipped all of that. The player Ink Blowout had discovered a different spot to get out of bounds, here on the right side of the level. And then they discovered that by simply running in a straight line, they could just jump right from the spot they got out of bounds all the way to the end level trigger at the bottom of the level. So in this new route you could then go out of bounds here and just jump across the void here and conveniently land right here where the end level trigger is. This made the level extremely fast and skipped almost all of the intended gameplay. Now, I feel Acer might just be our most unique champion in this whole story. Acer only ever set one world record, and this record is the second smallest world record improvement ever set in the game's history, only 11 seconds. And they are the only world record holder to not break a minute barrier. All in all, pretty lackluster when you only look at the statistics. But this record kind of speaks to me in a way that the others don't. First of all, Acer took down a record that had stood in almost 5 years, so they were in a sense the catalyst for what was about to happen. You could say that their small 11-second world record was the nudge that tipped the boulder, which would eventually really start rushing down and crushing everything in its path. I also think there's just something beautiful about getting a single small world record, because no matter how small it is, Acer had to put in the work to get that world record, and by doing that they cemented themselves as one of the game's champions, and I find it kind of satisfying that nobody can ever take that away from them, small record or not. Or as Acer themselves would put it, world record, PogChamp. So, at this point Acer had nudged the boulder and it had started picking up speed, because only around 4 months after Acer's run a new champion emerged. Spidyballs set 3 world records, the first a 33:01 on the 26th of March 2019, then a 32:25 on the 3rd of April, and 2 days later a 31:41 on the 5th of April. Now Spidey also added a few tricks into the run. Remember that trick Acer had tried in the level hostage situation but didn't manage? Well, Spidey would manage to do it. In hostage situation, you're supposed to rescue hostages from these 3 locations. To do this, you first have to enter this main area, and from there you crawl into this air vent to get into the next room. In there you push a few buttons to free 1 hostage and open 2 doors. You can then proceed to enter the last area where you free the last batch of hostages before going in here to finish the level. Now at the start of the level there's a cutscene where Spider-Man drops from the ceiling before you gain control of the character. The players Sam Witch and Piston found out that by mashing A and B in the intro cutscene, Spider-Man will be able to web zip his way out of bounds. So you basically start the level out of bounds. You can then swing over to this corner, skipping a loading trigger in the hallway here. This makes it so some areas in the level don't spawn in at all, and you have much more freedom to move around. With the walls not loaded in, it's possible to rescue the hostage that you normally free by pressing the button by swinging close enough to them. You can then rescue another hostage here and then go directly to this door and just swing past it without having to open it, since the walls are not there. From there, you can rescue the last hostages and finish the level. The route then looks like this. Go out of bounds at the start, swing past the loading trigger here to make the level look like this, rescue one hostage here and the second here, and then just go past the door here to get to the last section. As you can see, this skips the air vent here and the room beyond completely. Then in the level The Lizard's Maze, Spidey implemented another trick. This level revolves around making your way along the roof of a tunnel to get to the end. The crawling on the roof is very slow and finicky, so it's pretty tedious to traverse. The normal route looks like this, where most of this is crawling along the roof of the tunnel. But the players Ababob and Sandwich discovered that you could enter this tunnel here instead, which is normally a dead end. You can then use your web to clip halfway through the wall, then go into first-person mode and web one more time to go fully through the wall. Then you enter first-person mode one more time and aim towards one of the other hallways and then swing across the out-of-bounds area to reach the end quicker. The route then looked like this. Get to this corridor, clip out of bounds, swing across here and get to the end, skipping this portion of the slow crawling to get around the tunnel. Then in the level Stop the Presses, Spidey implemented another clip to get out of bounds to skip a part of the level. Normally you have to destroy 2 generators located here and here to get through this door, where you then have to destroy 2 more generators, which in turn allows you to enter this shaft where the trigger to end the level is located. Spidey destroyed the 2 generators at the start to reach the second room, but instead of destroying the other 2 generators, he clipped through the wall here and dropped directly into the end level trigger. The route then looked like this, where Spidey did the first 2 generators as before, but then clipped through the wall here to get to the end, skipping the second 2 generators completely. The last big new trick in the run was in the level Bugle's Basement. In this level, you're normally supposed to go here to destroy 1 generator. You then proceed along the level, and once you enter a loading trigger here, a gate slams down, blocking the path behind you, so you have to head to this air duct to press a switch, which opens a door here, where you destroy another generator, and after that you can end the level here. A short cutscene plays where Spider-Man runs to this opening, and it's when you reach this opening that the level truly ends. Now, the player Sandwich had discovered a way to get out of bounds in this level. Remember how after destroying the first generator you entered this loading zone which drops a gate behind you to block that path? Well, if you're quick enough, after triggering the gate to fall, you can web zip your way backwards behind the gate before it reaches the ground. When the game closes the gate, all the sections earlier in the level unload, since you're normally not supposed to be able to enter that area at all after the gate falls down. With this, Spidey was able to get out of bounds and then swing under the level, skipping loading triggers for the next area. This meant that a lot of walls in the next sections of the level were missing as well. So Spidey was able to swing right into the last part of the level, jump into the last room, and enter the opening that ends the level. So let's look at this from above. You start the level like normal and destroy the first generator. You then go to this section, trigger the gate, but go behind it before it lands on the ground. The first part of the level then disappears, allowing you to jump into the nothingness and swing under the level, skipping a loading trigger here, which in turn makes sure none of the walls in the last section of the level load in. You then swing towards here, jump past this door and go directly to the end. This skipped having to enter the air duct to press the switch, destroying the second generator and the end level cutscene. Now, as a side note, I just want to mention that this is my favorite skip in the whole run. This, I feel, is the most intricate skip in the game, with a lot of fun pieces you have to puzzle together. Getting behind the gate before it closes requires good timing. Swinging under the level is tricky because it's kind of easy to get back in bounds too early or go too far from the level and fall into the void. And then lastly, jumping past the wall at the end is not super difficult, but can fail if you're not careful. All in all, this makes for just the right amount of challenge and diversity that pulling it off is super fun and satisfying. So I really like this trick. Anyway, back to Spidyballs. I've talked about all the big time saves Spidey implemented, but there were also a bunch of other small ones. Take for example some of the bosses in the game. In the Scorpion fight, there is a cutscene that plays after a certain amount of time, where the Scorpion breaks a wall and goes into the next room. But if you're fast enough to knock him out, you can end the fight before the cutscene ever starts. Then in the Rhino fight, it's possible to knock him out very quickly by either getting him stuck in some barrels, or what's even faster is hitting him with a combination of jumps and hits in a loop that stun locks him during the whole fight. And lastly, in the Doc Ock fight, you normally have to take some time to get rid of these barriers, and once they are gone, you have a certain amount of time where Doc Ock is vulnerable and you can hurt him. If you're fast enough, you can actually knock him out in the first of these vulnerable phases and one-cycle him. But if you miss it, you have to lower these barriers again, losing a bunch of time. Now, our previous champions had dabbled in these strats to some extent, but Spidey was the first to go for all of them, and although he didn't always succeed in pulling these off, I feel it was a strong sign that the game was getting more optimized and players were truly starting to seriously implement all the time saves they knew about into the run. So, who was Spidyballs? Well, he was the player to bring the game into a more optimized era. Gone were the days where a player could just practice the game a bit and snag a world record with minimal work. No, Spidey was the champion to usher in a new era where if you wanted a shot at the world record, you needed to start working hard to achieve it. We now enter the second part of our story. The second half of our champions who would really start to push this game to new heights. The first one in this second half was the player imprisoned Shadow, who I will just refer to as Shadow. Now, most of our previous champions just came, ran the game for a few days and then left, but Shadow's journey with the game was a bit more sporadic. In fact, before getting any world records, Shadow had first run the game in 2015 and held the second place position on the leaderboard for some time. He would then play the game on and off for the next few years before finally committing to go for the world record in 2021. Now, Shadow set 2 world records. The first was on the 30th of January 2021 and clocked in at 31 minutes and 4 seconds. With Shadow being a player who took regular breaks, he didn't achieve the second world record until more than a year after the previous one. Shadow's second world record was set on the 11th of March 2022, and it was an important one because it didn't just break 1 minute barrier, but 2. So it also broke the half-hour barrier and clocked in at 29 minutes and 35 seconds. Now, would you believe me if I told you Shadow didn't really implement any new skips into the run? Well, that's precisely how it was. In fact, he didn't even go for the out-of-bounds skip in the basement. How can that be? How was Shadow able to improve the world record by 2 minutes in a speedrun this short with no new skips? Well, it was all in the movement. And this is in some ways the pattern moving forward in this story. Although there are still a few skips to talk about, and they do of course weigh in on the times people achieve, the future of the world records for this game would not necessarily be defined by these skips, but rather the movement and speed at which they were performed. You see, I haven't really talked about this yet, but the movement in this game is extremely deep. Spider-Man runs very slowly, so webbing is almost always the preferred method of movement. But webbing precisely is extremely difficult. Spider-Man tends to web to the wrong surface, so you have to face the wrong direction when you land. Hitting the right angles when swinging is very hard. When chaining many swings together, each swing often feels like a roll of the dice as to where Spider-Man will actually swing. And Spider-Man loses height and swings at different speeds depending on when and where you start your swings. All of this leads to an extremely complex and deep movement system, which really takes a lot of knowledge to master, and that's what Shadow did. Shadow really elevated the movement standards for the N64 and demonstrated a mastery of webbing not seen before in the game, showing the world just how incredibly fast and complex this game was. But also, by squeezing so much time from the movement, Shadow inevitably got people to ask themselves just how much more time save could be squeezed from the game. Well, our last 3 champions would attempt to answer that question. Now, before we move on, I want to mention that out of all of our champions, Shadow is probably the most active one. Like I mentioned earlier, Shadow had run the game for more than 5 years before achieving a world record, and out of all the champions, only Shadow and Acer9393 would actually improve their PBs after losing the world record, demonstrating a level of commitment to the game not really shown by any of the other world record holders. To illustrate this point further, out of the 10 years Imprisoned Shadow has been speedrunning the game, only in 2016, 2017 and 2019 has he not achieved a personal best in some of the categories in the game, with his latest being set in 2024. Sure, he takes breaks from the game to speedrun other stuff, but he always comes back. So I feel like out of all of the champions, Imprisoned Shadow might just be the one who has shown the game the most commitment and love. Now, before we get to our last 3 champions, I want to talk a bit about when I ran the game. Every Christmas and Easter I host a little tournament or event with some of my N64 speedrunning friends called Holiday Special. The first Easter we played Bug Bumble, and the first Christmas we played Turok. For our third event, Easter 2023, we voted on Spider-Man and 4 people participated. Me, Bluescreen18, The Kovic and Lolaway. Bluescreen won the event with a time of 32 minutes and 16 seconds, so congratulations to Bluescreen for winning his second Holiday Special event. I should also mention that Bluescreen has since beaten his PB with a time of 30 minutes and 51 seconds. My last run in the event and PB to this day is 38 minutes and 59 seconds. A very bad time, all things considered, but I'll talk more about my experience with the game in the last part of the video. If any of you watching are speedrunners and have an N64 and are interested in joining these events, feel free to send me a message on Discord or speedrun.com. Now, it was actually during this event in Easter 2023 that our next character in this story would claim his seat among the champions of Spider-Man. On the 29th of March 2023, a runner called SecondPlace 92 completed a run clocking in at 28 minutes and 51 seconds, breaking a minute barrier while at it. A few days later, on the 10th of April, he got a time clocking in at 28 minutes flat, and then lastly, just over a month later, on the 18th of May, he got his last world record with a time of 27 minutes and 31 seconds, breaking yet another minute barrier. SecondPlace did discover that during the auto-scroller level Subway, where you simply have to wait for the train to reach its destination, if you face the camera towards the wall instead of the front or back of the tunnel, the level will complete around 10 seconds faster than normally. Besides this, just like in Imprisoned Shadow, SecondPlace didn't really implement any big new skips, but simply relied on his superior movement and web slinging to gain time. Shadow theorized that getting a sub 29 minute time would be the game's final minute barrier, but the fact that SecondPlace got a 27 just goes to show how much time can be squeezed from the game, with nothing but better movement. And honestly, looking at SecondPlace's last run, you can actually see many places he messed up, like how he got the clip out of bounds in hostage situation on the 3rd try, and had trouble clipping out of bounds in the Lizard's Maze. Not that his run was bad, it being a world record should tell you that his run was extremely good, and there were of course a lot more positive fast sections in his run compared to the mistakes. But the mistakes do highlight 2 things. Firstly, with how movement heavy the game is and how difficult some of these tricks can be, it shows just how difficult it is to get a very clean run. But secondly, and more importantly, it shows that there is still more time saved to squeeze out. Now, a testament to how good SecondPlace's run actually was is that it wouldn't get beaten until more than a year later. And not only that, but it wouldn't get beaten until a bunch of new discoveries had been made. You could say that SecondPlace had optimized the game pretty well with the knowledge he had at the time. But with the new tricks, another wave of speedrunners would have to start chipping away at the run to get the game optimized again. So let's meet our next champion. Fetti is our first multi-platform champion, and having held multiple world records for the PlayStation version of the game, Fetti was a prime contender to snag the world record from SecondPlace. Since SecondPlace's world record had stood around a year uncontested, Fetti felt the N64 version needed some competition and love, and decided to give it a go. His main challenge was to get used to the controls and pacing on the N64 version, since the N64 runs slightly faster than the PlayStation version. So after finding his rhythm and getting used to the game, Fetti set his first world record with a 26 minute and 55 second run on the 18th of September 2024, breaking yet another minute barrier for the game. And then 2 days later, on the 20th, he got a 26:41, and that would be his last world record for the game. Now, Fetti added in a lot of new tricks, so let's take a look. First, we have to look at a new type of glitch called the Web Dome glitch. Spider-Man has a variety of attack moves he can do to fight enemies in this game. One of these attacks is the Web Dome, where Spider-Man forms a dome. This dome stays in place until the player presses C left or C down, and then the Web Dome explodes in all directions, hurting all enemies around him. The Trancer Grandpa glasses discovered that starting the Web Dome on the same frame as Spider-Man is walking off an edge will result in the Web Dome lifting and steadily gaining height. You can then release the Web Dome when you have achieved the desired height and fall back down. There is a time limit though, because the Web Dome automatically explodes after a few seconds of inactivity, so you cannot just ride endlessly upwards. In the level Missile Attack, you're normally supposed to climb up these walls, but Fetti utilized this glitch 2 times to get to the top of the building a little faster than it takes to climb it normally. He also used this glitch in the level Tunnel Crawl. In Tunnel Crawl, you normally first go through this tunnel to get to this second section of the level. Once there, you have to swing across the room to push a button here that will lower the electricity here, giving you access to the bottom of the room. You then push one more button, which grants you access to this corridor where the level ends. Fetti, however, right after reaching the last room, used the Web Dome glitch to gain enough height to go over a wall here and dropped straight down into the final corridor, where the level ends. The route then looked like this, where you go through the initial tunnel, walk off the ledge here to do the Web Dome glitch, and go over the wall here to reach the other side, and to the bottom here. So this skipped having to press the 2 buttons completely. Then in the level Scale the Girders, he used yet another glitch called the Flying Spider. If you climb on a wall, then enter aiming mode and aim at the right spot, you can shoot and zip towards the location you aimed at. However, if you hold web swing during your shot and then cancel that web swing right after you started it, you can interrupt the zip and the swing, and Spider-Man will enter a glitched state called the Flying Spider. In this state, Spider-Man can fly to a certain extent and the player can control the flight, although the controls are pretty wonky and unintuitive. This state can't be used for too long though, since the game considers Spider-Man to be in a falling state, and if Spider-Man falls for too long, the game assumes he is either falling out of bounds or stuck somewhere in a falling position and warps him back to the top of the level. In Scale the Girders, Fetti used this glitch to skip most of the level. The aim of the level is to climb to the top of this crane and then swing across to this box to the end of the level. However, if you remember from Jawscast skip earlier in the video, the trigger to end the level is actually down here at the lower side of the map. The player Niloqui discovered that you could make your way to this container here at the other side of the bottom of this building and initiate the Flying Spider there. And from there he could just fly right from the start of the level to the end level trigger below the crate here. Fetti used this in his run, and the route then looked like this. Just climb to the other side of the building, start the Flying Spider glitch and fly to the end of the level, skipping the climb to the top completely. And then in the level Symbiotes Infest Bugle, Fetti implemented yet another trick, found by the player Grandpa Glasses. In this level you normally have to make your way along these rooms by going through all of these corridors. However, Grandpa Glasses discovered he could go into the corner here, go into aiming mode and then zip his way out of bounds. He could then swing under the level and go back in bounds a bit later in the level. This skipped a loading trigger, which would make it so only a part of the level was loaded in. After that, Fetti could simply jump through the nothingness here and go directly to the end level trigger. The route then looked like this, where you first went out of bounds and under the level here, and then, having skipped the loading trigger around here, the level looked like this, allowing him to continue directly to the end of the level. Fetti's last trick would come in the level stopping the Thaw. So normally in this level you have to start by entering this room to hit a switch, which in turn gives you access to another 3 rooms. You then enter each room one by one to hit a switch in each one. Every time you hit one of these switches, a short cutscene plays, showing an exhaust port being closed. Once all 3 exhaust ports have been closed, the level ends. So the route looks something like this. Enter the first room to unlock the others, and then enter the other 3 rooms one by one to hit the switches inside. Okay, so through a combination of work from the players Niloqui, Mr. Monch, Ink Blowout and Soteleer, it was discovered on the PlayStation version that after unlocking the doors and entering the first switch room, if you had the Fire Web ability equipped, you could shoot the first switch in a specific way, so you actually hit it twice, making 2 cutscenes play at once and counting as 2 switches pressed in total. When tried on the N64 version, it was discovered that the fire webs don't even need to be equipped, and you can just perform the trick using regular webbing. Now remember, our goal here is to have 3 switches pressed in total, so by doing this trick we have hit 2 out of the 3 switches in one room, meaning another room could be skipped entirely. Well, it gets better actually, because after hitting the same switch twice in succession like that, which is not intended behavior, the switch actually reverts back to being hittable, so once the cutscene finishes, you can hit that same switch one more time to finish the level, meaning all 3 switches can now be cleared in this one room. So the route then looked like this. Enter the first room to gain access to the other rooms, enter any one of these 3 rooms and hit the same switch 3 times to finish the level, skipping 2 rooms completely. And that's it for all the tricks Fetti implemented. When Fetti started running the N64 version, he hoped to revive the N64 side of the community and provide competition. Well, you could say that Fetti succeeded in that, because that competition would come in the form of our 8th champion, and this time we did not have to wait long to see it. In Fetti's description for his last world record on speedrun.com, he writes, "The 25 still possible." So it was now up to our last champion to get that fabled 25-minute run. Alright, we're here. Our last champion. Brobey steps forth, and he does so less than a month since Fetti's last world record. Fetti set his last world record on the 20th of September, and Brobey set his first world record on the 11th of October. Now, as a side note, something kind of ironic happened when Brobey took the world record. It's typical in speedrunning that after losing a world record, the player will then get knocked to second place and will stay there for some time. Well, let's look at how many days each world record holder has spent in second place. I'm not including Fetti because he is currently in second place and we don't know for how long he will hold it, and of course Brobey, who has yet to be knocked to second place. Now see this lowest column here, and who is it? Well, yes, ironically, out of all of these players, the player called second place has spent by far the least amount of time in second place. I just found that kind of interesting. Anyway, back to Brobey. In October 2024, something kind of wild happens. On around the 3rd or 4th of October, Brobey starts practicing how to speedrun the game, with experienced runners Soteleer and Cheeky Chunk helping him learn the game. Brobey then does his first run ever on the 7th of October, clocking in just over 29 minutes. And then only 4 days later, on the 11th of October, Brobey goes absolutely berserk and enters the Champions Club by setting 3 world records in one day, firmly cementing himself as one of the best runners the game has ever seen. And it only took him around a week. Brobey is an absolute beast in how quickly he not just learned the game but also claimed the world record. His first world record clocks in at 26 minutes and 35 seconds. His second run at 26 minutes and 23 seconds, and his last one, believe it or not, at 25 minutes and 36 seconds, shattering the 26-minute barrier Fetti had alluded to. Well, it turns out Brobey is not going for a 25-minute run. No, he actually has his sights set on a 24-minute run. Did Brobey add in anything new? Well, a little bit. In the level Tunnel Crawl, remember how Fetti had used the web dome glitch to get over the wall here? Well, instead of using the web dome glitch, Brobey used the flying spider trick to get over the wall, which is considerably safer. Other than this, Brobey didn't really add in anything new. In fact, Brobey didn't even go for the web dome glitch in missile attack and opted to do it just normally. No, Brobey just took the movement to another level, while also performing all of the tricks incredibly fast. During the event Web the Record, where many Spider-Man runners from various consoles come together to play as much Spider-Man as they can and try to improve their best times, Brobey managed to get another world record, clocking in at 25 minutes and 2 seconds on the 19th of October 2024. Unfortunately, he did not manage to get the 24 during Web the Record, but a few days later on the 26th of October his grind came to an end when he reached his goal with a time of 24 minutes and 38 seconds, completely shattering the 25-minute barrier. And this is where the world record stands at the making of this video. Now, can it go lower? Of course it can. In the description on the YouTube video with the world record, Brobey alludes to having made some mistakes in his run and a 23 being possible. But only time will tell whether a 23-minute run will happen. If history is anything to go by, then yes, we will see a new champion emerge at some point to claim the next world record. But who knows? Maybe Fetti or SecondPlace will break the cycle and be the first to ever reclaim the champion status. Only time will tell. Now, in this video I have presented 8 champions and their contributions to the speedrunning world record history, but this game, when looking at it from further back, of course has so many more champions. There are the PlayStation champions, PC champions, Dreamcast champions, and believe it or not, a single Macintosh champion. And then most of these are split into both console and emulator with various categories, so there is a plethora of stories out there which I have not covered. And we haven't even started talking about all the people who never set the throne as champions but contributed to the community with glitch hunting, strat hunting, or just speedrun the game in general. I just wanted to be known that this community is much bigger than the sliver I have demonstrated in this video, and I also want to mention that I only really covered the biggest skips and glitches in this video. But like in most speed games, there are of course so many more minor strats runners use which I opted not to cover in this video. If you want to know more, I would suggest watching Soteleer's video about the PlayStation version of the game, which covers a lot of things I did not talk about in this video. Okay, what do I think of the game as a speed game? Well, I'm going to be honest here, and frankly, I don't like it. First of all, the general movement is kind of wonky. Spider-Man's running and jumping feel kind of off and unnatural, so just running around feels weird. But this speedrun doesn't really revolve around running, it revolves around swinging, and like I've mentioned before in this video, the web swinging has an incredibly high skill ceiling, which honestly makes for a good speed game. It's just that I personally never really connected with the web swinging on a level where I could enjoy it. Spider-Man's webs just never seem to go where I want them to go. Either they go way too far to the left or right, and then Spider-Man is just so sticky and he keeps sticking to walls which you don't want him to stick to, and then you try to swing off the wall but get stuck to another wall and everything just turns into a mess. Now, I am fully aware that this is just a skill issue and it might be a bit harsh to criticize a game you simply aren't good enough at, but I just want to tell you my honest opinion and how I experienced learning the game. When I practiced the levels, I just didn't really enjoy the process like I normally do, and instead I just felt more frustration with the mechanics. The game has all the makings of a great speed game, a plethora of big skips that save a lot of time and aggressive tricks that save little time, and it has a high skill ceiling for its movement system, but the game unfortunately just never resonated with me. Now, I think it's a bit unfair of me towards the community to end this video on a negative note, so I asked some of the runners to tell me why they like the game. So don't take it from me, let's hear from some of the champions why Spider-Man is a good speed game.
Hi, my name is Willie Fetti, aka Fetti. After I got used to the controls, which were, a departure from the PlayStation 1 controls, it was just really fun. I started realizing that I was one of the only people who could hit stuff that we only thought were in a task. It just kept me running the game, and obviously the game runs quicker, and this is one of my childhood games, so no matter what version it's on, it's still my favorite game of all time.
Spider-Man 64 means a lot to me. Not only is it a very memorable game from my childhood, but it was also my first ever speed game in the 10 plus years I've been speedrunning. I first saw the game featured on SGDQ 2013 by Bonesaw, and it was through that run that made me sure that this was going to be the game I picked up.
I think that this Spider-Man is the best Spider-Man of all time. I think that the story is amazing, and honestly, as a speed game, the tricks are some of the funnest tricks to hit and really difficult, but once you can pull it off, they're awesome. And I mean, I can only say good things about this game, and I could go on forever.
This is not only a cool game with a lot of variety in skips, movement, and tricks, but it has a perfect learning curve for the speedrun, as it offers numerous ways to practice with level select, and it being relatively short means that you can learn the game really quickly, pump out attempts, and honestly, just have a great time running. Most of the time, because this game also has, a good amount of RNG, which will often get you frustrated and hate this. Looking at you, Venom 2.
The best part about SM2K for me is the combination of its crazy movement and tricks, like you'll be going out of bounds and then swinging around everywhere, and then it just feels so rewarding once you finally land all that stuff.
But yeah, the community's grown, and as it's grown, a lot more people have done different versions of the game, and I kind of just started sticking with Nintendo 64. It runs really well. It's quicker than the PlayStation 1 version, and being able to hit the task strats, helps a little bit. So yeah, the tricks are just fun. Everything is just fun about this game. The RNG can be a little bit stressful, and I can rage really hard.
The community is filled with chill people and is very welcoming, and it's through them that have really evolved this game into what it is today. They have taken the game to brand new heights that I never even thought were possible, and honestly, it's been amazing to see the progression and the community just building up more and more. So honestly, I highly recommend checking everything what this game has to offer. You won't be disappointed, and yeah, just have a great time running.
And then to top it off, you have all these lovable voice lines that are very quotable. And then you're just like, okay, I love this game. It's great.
But I do think that this game has a long way to go. I think we're figuring out new things as it goes along. This game is fun. I love it. Honestly, I still think it's the best Spider-Man game of all time. And y'all can fight me on that in the comments. And if you want to fight me on it, go ahead.
So that's about it for the video. First of all, I want to give a huge thanks to Soteleer, who graciously gave me access to his research for tricks and glitch discoveries, which he had accumulated through research for his own video. It would mean a lot to me personally if you head over to Soteleer's video, which I have a link for in the description, and check out his speedrun history for the game on the PlayStation version. He literally saved me so much work and research that I can't restate enough just how valuable that was for this video. I would also like to thank all the champions mentioned in the video for their help, along with Spyrun, Niloqui, and Grandpa Glasses for their help with some technical questions. Also, a big thanks to Bluescreen18, The Kovic, and Lolaway for running the game with me. And lastly, of course, thank you so much, dear viewer, for watching. The next video will be about the game we voted for in our 2023 Christmas holiday special event, Gex 3 Deep Cover Gecko. Now, Gex 3 has a lot of interesting tech to cover, so feel free to subscribe if you don't want to miss that.